Good evening, good evening, and welcome to Couch Conversations with the Doctors. What night is it tonight? It is Monday night, and it is time for Couch Conversations with the Doctors. As always, we're going to go around our esteemed panel, and we're going to do our great introductions to everyone who is here. To the man who actually wants no accolades, but he is a world-renowned urologist. And he is the head of God's Pharmacy, and that's Pharmacy with an F, our very own Dr. Terry Mason. Dr. Mason.
Thank you, Nikki, for that kind introduction. And I'm glad to be here on Couch Conversations. And I'm hopeful to, along with my colleagues, begin to share some things that will enlighten maybe some areas that were maybe not dark, but dim before tonight.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you so much. To the gentleman who is the art connoisseur, but he has a plethora of information. That's our very own Joseph Harrington. Joe Harrington.
Hi, Nikki, and I want to thank you and Congressman Davis, as we do all every time we join you, for providing this platform, for providing information to the community. My name is Joe Harrington. My career was mostly in public health and healthcare. Worked at 3 different hospitals. Retired in 2017 as the regional health officer for Cook County, as well as an administrative law judge from the Illinois Department of Public Health. I know enough to be dangerous. That's what I say.
All right. Well, Linda Johnson said good evening. As soon as you said you know enough to be dangerous, to my colleague and she's laughing. All right. To my colleague who leaves us and goes and have fun in the sun, but he is always here. That's our very own Dr. Douglas Graham. Dr. Graham.
Thank you, Nikki. I think many people know that I'm a retired physician. I've worked in the western suburbs for 30 years. And after retired, worked with the congressman in his office in Washington, D.C. And it's a real eye-opening experience. I'm honored to be here. It's a pleasure to speak with you and work with my colleagues. I'm going to try and answer your questions as best I can.
Outstanding, and thank you so much. I see Sister Bonnie has chimed in with us, and she's saying good evening to everyone. To that doctor who is known on the streets as Dr. 100. She is the true community wellness doctor, our very own Dr. Maya Green. Dr. Green.
Hi, Nikki. Hello, Congressman. Thank you for having me. It's always good to connect and learn from community. And so I'm excited about tonight's topic, and I'm ready to talk. I'm ready to learn.
All right. To the man who says I threaten him to be here every Monday night, but he seems to always be on time. That's our very own Dr. James Miller. Dr. Miller.
Well, good evening, Nikki and Congressman Davis, and to my colleagues. We're glad to be able to join this evening. And as always, we have a lively conversation that is informative for the community. And again, my credentials are I'm a retired internist, practiced about 40 years in the West Side and actually on all sides of town, and as well as in some of the suburban areas. And always been interested in healing the community and preventing diseases, because I think that we are better off if we can prevent a problem than trying to fix it after people get it. So we're here tonight to see what we can offer and to learn as well. Even though I'm retired from practicing clinical medicine, I'm still trying to learn.
That's right.
Outstanding. I want to say hey to Tyrena Newkirk Sutton, who is here with us. And Tyrena, I am going to call you back. The day has just been so busy, but I haven't forgotten about you. Want to say hey to Miss Deborah, who is here from Coleman's Barbecue. She says good evening to everyone. So hey, Deborah, who is here with us. To the man who makes this possible for us each and every Monday night. To the one who teaches us that true wealth is health, our very own Congressman of the Illinois 7th Congressional District, the vanguard of healthcare, Congressman Danny K. Davis. Congressman? You're muted, Congressman. I see the Congressman is having some technical difficulties. Let's see if we can try to fix that.
Yeah,
there he is. Go ahead, Congressman.
Hadn't gotten into it. I always say no big deal. Whatever it takes a little time to do, it probably will ultimately be taken care of. And I think it also helps you live longer. You don't get frustrated. You don't figure you're trying to get to where you're going before you get there. But I was delighted to know that Miss Coleman is on Coleman's Barbecue. I take a great deal of pride in people that I know and people that I know where they're from. A fellow named Henry Coleman graduated from high school with my one of my sisters, and that group is still engaged. They go down to Durham, Arkansas, and have class reunions, and I just love the Coleman barbecue. I mean, I smell it. And I drive by there on my way home sometimes, and I don't even have to eat dinner after I get home. I just still got the aroma from the barbecue. But I've been thinking the last few days. Uh, this afternoon, I was at a press conference over on Lake Street where a big health collaboration has come together. A group of them, Bobby Wright, mental health or behavior health, habilitative systems, counseling service, a whole bunch of them. And the state, of course, is engaged and involved with it. And it's going to be sort of like a multi purpose center. They've got a great big space on Lake Street so that multiple kinds of activity can take place. And I was thinking as I was there and as I listened to the press conference and I participated in it, it just sort of reinforced for me that it takes an awful lot to change health status. I mean, and people often ask ourselves, what are we really looking for? What are we trying to do? And there are a lot of different ways I often say to skin a cat, because it seems that no matter what we do and everything that we do, I was at a delightful homegoing service or going away service Saturday for a friend of mine, a fellow named Cleve Walker. He and his wife, uh, business people in Chicago. As a matter of fact, at one time, Cleve was president of the board of Doctors Hospital in Hyde Park. All of you will remember Dr. Jim Desnick and the Hyde Park Hospital. And there was a time when there were still a bunch of community hospitals in Chicago, and people were trying to keep them alive, keep them from closing. Most of them have closed. Uh, there's still a few disproportionate share hospitals, and they're always having serious trouble. I mean, serious trouble all the time. We had a debate and a discussion last week. We created a task force in the Ways and Means Committee to take a hard look at rural health needs and inner city health needs in underserviced communities. And of course, Republicans being Republicans, they put much more emphasis on the rural needs than the inner
Oh, there
city
you
needs. And of course, many of us recognize the need for both. That is, whether you're in inner city America or whether you're in rural America, many of the issues affecting your health and your ability to get the care that you need plague both areas, plague both communities. I have a great deal of empathy for rural America because I remember reading about a time when they had virtually no hospitals at all before the Hill-Burton Act. That is, before a mechanism was put in place where they could get health care. And some of this is not just from reading about whatever you read about, but also yesterday was Mother's Day. And I can recall my mother having to go 100 miles to get to a hospital to be treated. She always had hypertension and high blood pressure. And in order to get the treatment that she needed, my father would have to drive her to the medical center in Little Rock, Arkansas, which was about 100 miles from where we actually lived. And as we thought about Mother's Day and all of that, I didn't really get into it.
Poor dog suffered from depression because he had been left behind by his old owner. When this man heard the story.
Now, I'll be done. When I was a freshman in college, she got sick and she was on her way to the hospital. And I had gotten my uncle who lived in the town to take me home to just kind of see her. And it looked like I saw my father's car. They were coming one way, we were going the other way. So I said to my uncle, I said, Bob, I think that was Daddy's car I saw. I am not sure. Sure enough, it was. And when I got back to where I lived, they were at the place. My father and my mother and my sister was in the car with them. And I said, I was coming to see you. She said, well, I'm on my way to the doctor. I said, well, if you're going to the doctor, what are you doing at my house where I live? You ought to just be going on the Little Rock. We were in a different town. And she said, well, I thought I might die before I get there. And I wanted to see you before I die. So that was Mother's Day for me. And I told the people at the church, I said, I really didn't want to make any speeches today because I get into my mama's moment sometimes. I mean, thinking about the fact that she thought she was going to die and she was stopping by to say hello to me before she went on to the medical center in Little Rock, which was 50 miles away, to die. So that's my Mother's Day story. And so why don't we just get it on and move on? But health still is wealth, and it makes all the difference in the world. So retroactively, happy Mother's Day to all the mothers on The View, and we'll keep moving. All right.
Outstanding. Outstanding, Congressman. I want to say hey to Jack Orloff, who is here. He says hello to the healthcare team.
Well, haven't seen Jack in years. My goodness, Jack, how are you doing? It's been years since I've seen Jack Orloff.
So, Dr. Miller, as a physician, last week we had a number of questions when we talked. Well, May is Older Americans Month, and we are talking about healthcare for older Americans. And last last week we had a ton of questions that we couldn't kind of get to that was about women's health care and menopause. Exactly what is menopause, and is there a manopause? Well, the manopause question is for Joe Harrington. So, Dr. Miller, what is menopause and how do we characterize it? And by the way, Jack says, doing well, we need to get together and catch up. So, Jack, the congressman sees, and I've read your comment back, so we're going to have to make that happen. Dr. Miller?
Okay, well, menopause is we term it a syndrome, and it's characterized by what we call um, uh, some vasoactive symptoms, which is what the hot flashes are. Also, sometimes it can be associated with some depression and just it's a period in life of adjustment. So when we usually talk about it, we're talking about women, and for the most part, because that's the group that it has been discussed and defined in mostly. I think that men do have some kind of change of life situation as well as we age. But the menopause syndrome is a syndrome that has um, hot flashes is one of the probably the big known event that most people talk about. But that is just one symptom. There are many different kinds of symptomatology that's associated with it, including, as I said, sometimes depression may be a part of the process. There it's also a time when, as women, estrogen levels are declining. Um, Estrogen has a protective effect in terms of the cardiovascular system, and as it declines, some of that protection is lost, and so women begin to develop some of the cardiovascular disease at a higher rate than they had. While their estrogen level was elevated, and it's also a time when they reach a period of childbearing. A period is over. Menstrual period is for the most part is over, and so there are a lot of different kinds of changes that occur. And I think as human beings, as we begin to move from one stage of our life to another one, and when we perceive it that there are going to be things that um, are not going to be able to do that we used to do when we associated with youth, and we associated another thing with aging that has I think it probably has somewhat of a stressful effect on a lot of people. And there's some people who said, hey, I'm happy to be done with certain things. I'm happy to be done with administration. I'm happy that I won't have to worry about having children anymore. The women that have completed their desires in terms of the children that they want to have. But it's a syndrome, and in that syndrome, there's a lot of different symptomatology that does occur.
So, Dr. Miller, Joe, we're going to grab you in 1 second. Just want to acknowledge a number of the people here who are saying thank you for the conversation. Thank you, thank you, thank you. We're getting tons. At least there's about 26 or 27 thank yous for having this conversation in our anonymous chat. However, Kimberly Alexander Jackson has stood up for the girls and she says, good evening to all. Great subject. So, Kim, I want to thank you for saying great subject because, Dr. Miller, I'm going to pose a question to you in reference to this. I find myself needing to put my head in the freezer because that's how hot it gets. And honestly, I can only find relief if I go and open the freezer sometimes. And I don't know, we cannot control this burning sensation that actually it's like you get a hot foot and it goes up your entire body and you cannot control it. You just need to find some air somewhere. And I'm glad that you brought up the fact of cardiovascular disease and the whole cardiac metabolic profile syndrome, because approximately 60%, according to the American Heart Association and the CDC, approximately 60% of Black women age 20 and older have some form of cardiovascular disease. So, Dr. Miller, what do we do about the freezer episodes? Is there a way to control the freezer episodes?
Well, obviously there are there are some there are some symptomatic treatment for or actually some there are estrogen treatments that is used and in a certain dosage that is safe, um, and that does help to decrease the severity of the symptom. It doesn't make it go away, but it makes it less severe. Some women are taking products that are composed of that are made of plant estrogen that supposedly does have some symptoms release with it, and but I think the feeling hot and the perspiration that occurs with that is part of the process, and it doesn't completely go away with most of the treatment that we're able to prescribe. We can decrease the severity of it, but we can't make it not happen.
Oh, okay. Oh, all right. Well, we do have an anonymous question that says, "Thank you for sharing. You can use an estrogen treatment, but I've
You
been
know,
reading."
if I'm
Uh,
if I might
oh,
jump in.
go ahead. Go ahead, Dr. Mason. Well, it looks
I
like
think
Dr.
he frozen.
It looks like Dr. Mason
Yeah,
is
I was
having.
going to jump in there too, but go ahead.
Okay, no, go ahead,
Because
Dr.
I
Mason.
just no, what I was going to say is that I bet that I'm not muted. I'm not muted. Okay. All I want to say is, as a urologist who treats men with prostate cancer, one of the things that we want the people to understand, I'm really kind of confused. I keep doing an echo with myself. But the thing I was going to say is that as a urologist who treated prostate cancer, one of the things that was always part of treating prostate cancer was increasing the amount of the hormone that men produce called testosterone. And the same thing many times goes for certain cancers that we have, reducing the amount of estrogen that they have. And those things create this, actually, this causes biochemical menopause. And when the man, biochemical andropause. Oh, I don't know. I'm gone.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay.
It kicked
Dr.
me
Mason,
out. I
can you
don't know
hear
what's
us?
happening.
No, you're not kicked out. You're here. We see you.
Can you hear me?
Dr. Yes, we see you and hear you.
Yeah, I can hear you,
Yes.
but can you?
Can hear
We
you.
can
Okay, I
we
was
can
trying.
hear you and
Okay,
we
so
see you.
what I was trying to say is that, yeah. Okay, what I was trying to say is that as part of the treatment, okay, as part of the treatment for prostate cancer, we wanted to reduce the male hormone called testosterone. And there was two ways to do that. One way was to use a medication that we called at that time Lupron, not to make a commercial for them. But the other way that we did it was to actually remove the male's testicles. And when the drugs came out that allowed us to do that chemically, men were very relieved a bit by that. But when you did give men that medication, it put them in what was called andropause, in other words, male menopause. And they had the same symptoms, just like women had when women were put into menopause by these drugs for treatments of various and other. My colleagues can discuss those kinds of diseases that required that. But I just wanted people to know that this whole thing is caused by a change in hormones, and in women it happens at menopause. Men, it doesn't have the same sort of thing normally. It's only when you have a intervention with medication. And for women, most women go through menopause where your estrogen, and my colleagues can talk more about that, maybe Dr. Meyer or the doctors on the panel. But when you lose that estrogen, that loss of that estrogen is a good part of why you start having what we call vasomotor instability, commonly known as hot flashes. And so those are the things I wanted to say.
Oh,
That's
okay.
absolutely.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mason. Go ahead. Go ahead, Maya.
That's absolutely right, Dr. Mason. You wanted me to share what I know. I think you've shared everything. You mentioned you wanted me to share everything about why hot flashes happen. Well, we have a temperature controller in our head. Um, in this case, we'll have a couple of things that control temperature, actually. But in this case, there is the hypothalamus. It's in our head. It's literally in our heads, and part of our temperature control depends on that estrogen that Dr. Mason was talking about. Now, what happens in menopause, and you know, I know they say it happens the first 12 months. Everybody who does this knows it can, you know, that's a book, you know. Some people are saying 2 to 6 years, and then some people are having them 10 years out, you know. What happens is the drop in estrogen starts, the hypothalamus is used to having a certain level of estrogen, a certain level of attention from this hormone. Now it goes away. The hypothalamus does what everything else does. It looks for other stuff. So other hormones come in and try to like super regulate it. And it causes, it's like a lot of cooks in the kitchen, right? What happens when a lot of cooks get in the kitchen? And now the hypothalamus and the vasomotor, which is blood vessels, right, start going to whack because you got too many cooks in the kitchen. Now, how do our blood vessels react? Our blood vessels either get bigger to let off heat, or they get smaller to conserve heat. Now, they doing like this because they like, where's my attention from the estrogen? Where's my attention from the estrogen? You know, and then it's all meanings like so many people trying to tell the hypothalamus what to do to regulate the temperature at once, and things are out of whack. And so in order to bring it back into whack, here are some things. So that's why it's happening. Too many cooks in the kitchen after estrogen kind of is down and not doing what it usually does. Hypothalamus is like, no, I need some regulation. What am I doing here? And then a whole bunch of opinions from the other hormones about what to do. And then things are out of whack, right? So what do? It becomes a lot of times, if you're not interested in replacing the hormone because they're, you know, long-term, you know, complications sometimes of estrogen. There are other medicines, pregabalin, like the Lyrica, things like that, clonidine that people get. But before we get there, they're to control what's going on inside, right? A lot of people try to control kind of what's going on around them, which can lead to things like turning down the temperature before you go to bed, or turning down the temperature of your home, you know, drinking some cold water before you go to bed to set, like, we cool now, you know, putting layers on the bedding under you, layers on top. So when they say layers on the bedding, it's usually the layers under you. The layers on top, you can put a couple, that way you can take them off as the temperature changes. Turning on a fan, right? Because you can always use more layers on top of you to control how much of the fan you know, directly receive. And you can always pull them off if you need the fan. And then, just like what you would do with your bedding, dress yourself in layers, right? And then one of the things that I've seen success in is changing kind of your intake. So spicy foods are going to trigger that, you know, long before menopause, or people, if no one goes through, for those of us that haven't gone through it yet, you know, when I eat spicy foods, when you eat spicy foods, your body starts heating up naturally, right? Now, what happens if I don't have that thermostat, estrogen, to say, turn it down, turn it up? Then it's then looking like, what am I doing here? You know, alcohol can trigger it, and caffeine. And so those are the things that kind of I talk to, or I work with my patients on with respect to that. And then after that, hormones and things like that. And then just to put a pin in it, menopause, even though on paper, I said it, even though on paper menopause is defined as the first 12 months without menstruation, right? We know that's what's in the book. It's a lot of people experiencing long, like 10 years out, 6 years out, still having hot flashes, because a lot of times it has to be individualized. That's why before you do any of that, like the, you know, fan, things like that, but before you move into taking hormones and things like that, you do have to talk to your provider, because our bodies, even though we have books that tell us what the general body gonna do, your care is individualized. So talk to a provider you trust.
Oh my goodness, I live on jalapeno peppers and Tabasco sauce. I don't know what I'm going to do. I have no idea what I'm going to do. What I got from this conversation a moment ago is that I'm going to be putting my head in the freezer for the next 2 years. I don't know what to do. We have an anonymous question that says, "Thank you, Dr. Miller, for sharing the information about estrogen. However, I have been speaking to my doctor in reference to estrogen, but I've been reading about it as well. And it shows that estrogen can cause cancer."
Long-term effects taking estrogen, yes, possibility of breast cancer and abnormal menstrual bleeding can occur depending on the dosage, and if you're taking it as prescribed. So even though you may be postmenopausal and may stop your menstruation, once you get on estrogen, then, and if you withdraw, if you stop it, then you will again begin to bleed and have men, and women sometimes get upset because they think that they're finished with it, and then they're back on the estrogen. So the same situation that they had, now they're having menstrual bleeding again when they withdraw from the estrogen, or if they miss it for several days, they can have breakthrough bleeding. So yes, there are some of the long-term, some of the long-term side effects is an increased risk. It's not that everybody that gets it is going to have these problems, but there is an increased risk of having of cancer, especially breast cancer, and so that would be something that would certainly require close monitoring and being careful with.
Yeah, Nikki, if I
Yes,
if I can, yeah, I just
yes.
want to provide a little nuance and context of what's being said because it's a very interesting conversation. But two things came to mind. One is that medicine is both an art and a science. The science are the facts, the things we know based upon research and experience time after time after time. How you apply those facts, how you interpret them. That's the art of medicine. So not all doctors are the same because people may reach different conclusions based upon the science and the facts that they hear. So what the point that I want to make is a lot of what we say are general recommendations, but everyone is unique and has their own unique set of circumstances. So some of what we're saying may not apply to you specifically. Say, well, I don't get symptoms like, well, I don't have that. That's just because you are unique. There is nobody else like you in the world. And that's why it's important to have a physician that understands you, knows something about your history, and probably has seen you for a long time because they have a better idea of what your makeup is and what you can and cannot do. So I just want people to understand that what we're talking about are in general terms because sometimes people take things literally. So some of what we're talking about uh, is not going to be the same for all people. And hormones are common to men just like they're common to women. There are different types of hormones. We won't get into that. But I just want people to understand that what we're saying is generalized, and I think that's important to keep in mind.
Outstanding. Well, Yolanda Williams is here and she says, "Good evening." Mandine Mohammed is here. Mandine says, "I am watching and listening in Chicago." And Mandine, I got your message. We're going to get the congressman on your show to talk about couch conversations. I did get your message and we're going to make sure that that happens. Dr. Maya, I have a question specifically for you. Audrey Jaycox is here and she says, "Good evening, just as well." Hey, Audrey, how are you? Anonymous comment says, "I take estrogen. I am concerned after reading in reference to the cancer just as well. I am a male who is taking estrogen. Will I, or is it possible for me to get breast cancer from this?" Dr. Maya? Yep, I think she may be frozen. I think she is frozen. I see Dr. Travis is here with us, and she's saying, "Good evening to all." Just as well, Dr. Miller or any of the doctors on the panel, can you speak to that question? And I will make sure, sir, that once Dr. Maya is,
Sure.
well, I know she'll be back.
Yeah.
Can any of you answer that question? And then we'll make sure that she answers just as well when she returns.
So I think that the physician that prescribes it for you has that responsibility. And that's something that he or she should discuss with you and discuss how they're going to monitor you for that possibility. All of us who prescribe drugs are given a call to package insert, and it tells us about the incidence and frequency of side effects and has some suggestion about how frequently we ought to look at them. But the other concern that I have is that estrogen is being prescribed for a reason. And the question is, does that physician think that you're going to be more likely to be benefited from that or harmed by not getting the medication? Again, I haven't seen your chart, don't know the circumstances, but I think both those questions can be discussed with your physician. What are the benefits? What are the risks? And how do we monitor for the risks? And how frequently are the risks? Because some of these risks are very, very small. Less than 3%, less than 2%, less than 1%. So that may be able to put your mind at ease in terms of being that he's aware of the risk or she's aware of the risks, and that they have a plan to look after you, to monitor for those things that you don't like.
Outstanding, and thank you so much. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to, add to that. We don't know exactly why this individual is taking estrogen, and so everything, there's always benefit and risk involved with most medications, and so one look at it, and when we weigh that the benefit much outweighs the risk, and that would allow us to proceed and feel comfortable with prescribing it. And so again, one would have to determine why is that individual taking it, and what is the risk if they don't take it. So those are very important things. So yeah, I mean, obviously I can understand his concern that, okay, he's reading and he's hearing about the possibility of having breast cancer with the estrogen. But the question is, what happens if he doesn't take it? And that has to do with why he's taking it. What is the problem that he has, or the situation that he has, and that requires him to take estrogen? I think that's an important thing.
Yeah, so Dr. Miller, I have one other thought, and that is, when somebody raises that question, are they the same as the doctor who prescribed it, or are they different? Because unfortunately, on the internet, people can say what they think and believe. And sometimes they're doing it to persuade you, but not necessarily to inform you. So if you pick up that advice, I'd say check the source. Do they have the same training and experience and responsibilities of your own doctor? Because they may be persuading you not for the best of reasons.
Outstanding. Well, Connie Taylor is here, and she says, good evening, everyone. Dr. Travis is here. She says, good evening to all. And Nellie Purnell King is here, and she's saying, good evening to all just as well. Another comment here says, thank you, Dr. Mason, for sharing that men suffer from some type of menopause just as well. I tend to call it menopause, or my husband's midlife crisis. Does this menopause or midlife crisis cause us to have more arguments and want to buy young sports cars? That's interesting.
I can't comment on the sports cars. I can't comment on those things.
And she said they were young sports cars.
Right. And I can't comment. The question would be why, what is really, as Dr. Miller already had a conversation about, is why are these things being prescribed? And why is the physician saying that this particular kind of hormone is necessary for this particular man at this point in time? Do men go through what we call andropause? Do men have andropause? Well, there's the andropause I talked about earlier, which is caused by the physicians trying to treat prostate cancer. And oftentimes that requires manipulating the male hormone. And it used to be that would mean automatically that the testicles would have to be removed. But now there are drugs that are available that actually do the same thing. And it's expensive. They're very expensive, and it does create other kinds of side effects. And sometimes it's used as part of your treatment for prostate cancer. And oftentimes that's because they believe that by giving the man estrogen, cutting down his testosterone, that might be helpful in the treatment of his prostate cancer. I didn't say absolutely, but might be. Those are conversations you should have with either your urologist and or the urologic oncologist. That's the cancer doctor specializing in cancer for men, or it may just be an oncologist that's talking about this. So you need to get that information. And when you sit there and listening to them, I would say if there's something they say that you don't understand, stop them right there and say, "Sir or ma'am, I don't understand what you just said. Could you explain that to me in another way that I might be able to better understand it?" And if they refuse to do that, then you're sitting with the wrong kind of physician.
Mm.
Most docs will take the time to try to explain to you why these things are happening, why you're giving them, why you're prescribing the medication, and what the side effects ought to be, and some of the other things that could happen with taking these medications. So, and how long will you need to take these medications? And in addition to the hot flashes and things of that nature, what else may be? And of course, one of the things that men get most concerned about is that these drugs, when given, will also diminish their sex drive. And sometimes, if it was already partially diminished, it would make it even more so. So, those are all the things that have to be discussed with the physician and the patient to make sure. And I would go so far as when I was in practice, I would bring the partner in and discuss this with both the patient and the partner. Um, I would just always tell them, if you have a wife and another person, don't just bring them both at the same visit. So, yeah, just to make sure we keep down the confusion. But all jokes aside, what I did want to make sure is that they understood what was going on and it wasn't their fault, but yet these are expected side effects of the medication you're getting.
You sound like Solomon.
He is Solomon. He's very wise. Yeah, I want to share a personal experience. I believe I'm a recent prostate cancer survivor. I had 20 radiation treatments. I finished April the 22nd. And as far as I know, I don't have cancer. The cancer's gone. And so I'm excited about that. But I can say that for 2 weeks, I was taking estrogen during the time I was getting radiation to lower my testosterone level. And so I'm just giving you some personal experience relative to what Dr. Mason is saying, that this is what happens. The other thing is, and I want to really echo what Dr. Mason is saying, if you're seeing someone, a provider, a healthcare provider, physician, nurse, anyone, and they're not communicating with you, and even more importantly, if you're not communicating with them, communication is a two-way street. They'll give you information, and they will answer questions if you ask questions. But if you sit there and you don't ask any questions, you just nod like this, like everything is going on, they'll assume and they don't need to tell you anything. So they'll be thinking about going to the next patient in the next room because they're on the clock, which people don't know. They got to see another patient. So you are your best advocate. So when you're in the room with the doctor, make sure to ask questions if you don't understand what you're hearing. If it doesn't make sense to you, you don't completely understand it, or you may have missed something, ask them to repeat it, but please ask questions.
Outstanding. Well, Dr. Maya, I knew you were having some technical difficulties, and a gentleman chimed in and he asked a question specifically to you, but your colleagues picked up and started answering. He said that he wanted to ask you the question about he is taking estrogen, and he was concerned, would that set up breast cancer for him? So I know everybody here has answered, but I did want to just, also reassure him that you would be back and you would know about his question just as well. So, Melinda Maxwell is here and she says, I am loving the information on this most important subject. This will definitely be a good talk with my doctor. Thanks, everyone. Audrey Jaycock said, to God be the glory, Mr. Harrington. To God be the glory. And Valdemir Talley is here with us and he says, good evening to all. He says, good evening to all. Dr. Miller, you look like you want to say something. I didn't want to get in your way if you got something to say.
No, no.
Okay.
I don't have anything to say at this time.
Okay. All right. We'll move on to our next question. And our next Tony Jones Sims says, great comments. Thank you guys so very much. I love this conversation. It is so informative. Well, our next question says, I'm not having a problem with my sex drive, but thank you, Dr. Mason, for sharing. However, the hot flashes are unbearable. I know Dr. Maya mentioned that our intake has a lot to do with it. I don't do spicy. I've had ulcers in the past. I do drink a lot of cold water and I stay very active, but nothing tends to work for these hot flashes. And I do believe that the menopause may make me tired, and sometimes I think I may have bouts of depression. How can I deal with this? I try mindfulness that I heard on this show maybe a year ago. Is there anything else that I can do?
So I'll just put 2 cents in, and then the colleagues that know more can complete it. So to be clear, the original cause or food does play a factor, and food can be a trigger, right? The main cause of the hot flash experience is definitely not food. And you can eat everything or not eat any of those things that I mentioned and still have the hot flashes, right? So just to be clear, the main cause is the estrogen withdrawal that the hypothalamus or the temperature sensor is experiencing, and then all those cooks in the kitchen trying to tell it what to do. That's the main cause, right? Not necessarily what you're eating, right? What you're eating can help because it reduces the triggers. It's like being allergic to cats and not buying a cat, right? The cat didn't cause you to have your body to have the allergy. Your body is just baseline allergic, right? And so just to be clear, so I don't, and then to speak to the different changes in a mood, we call it lability, estrogen, the presence, absence, the moving, the swift changes of the hormones and things like that. You're spot on. That absolutely does happen. Now, for people that are experiencing those things and those first kind of external things, the fan, what else is it? The fan, the layers and things like that are not helping. There is, putting estrogen back, but I think the doctors have already talked about estrogen and the importance of connecting with your doctor to avoid kind of long-term complications of estrogen. I think, Nikki, you said they had already kind of talked about that. The other things that happen and that are available are medications. In order to take those medications, you would have to go to your doctor, find out what is kind of best for you, given your medication profile, your, things like that. So those are hormones, external stuff like we talked about, hormone therapy, medication therapy, things like that. Yoga has been shown to help, and mindfulness. So you're already doing that. My next question is, have you connected with a provider you trust to look at some other internal, like medication, things like that, approaches? Colleagues, you can chime in. Okay.
No, outstanding. And she's actually typed, thank you. So I wanted just to tell you that she said, thank you. This next question is really more of a statement, but it's kind of funny. And she's begging that I read it. She says, Dr. Mason, I am disappointed. I asked you to share with me how to talk my husband out of buying a Corvette when neither one of us can lean down into this car. This is what I'm talking about. And she's laughing. So I don't know if Dr. Mason can help tell you how to talk your husband out of buying a Corvette. And she says we are both well over our 70s. I am 79 and he is 82. We cannot get into a Corvette. So we hear you. We are going to pray that your husband actually thinks more about an SUV than that Corvette. So let us just let you know that we're going to be working on that for you. Robin Robin Hardaway is here, and she says, "What about synthetic meds for everything? Why don't they have plant-based beds and
I think
also
she means
meds?"
meds,
Okay,
plant-based
meds.
meds.
Okay,
I think that's
plant-based
what she
meds.
means.
Okay. And then she says meds for, oh, okay. So in her next line, she says meds for treatment. Why don't they have plant-based meds for treatment? Well, I'm going to leave that answer to our two physicians who are also farmers who can talk about that. And that's Dr. James Miller and Dr. Terry Mason. But right before they answer, Joe, I just want to let you know that we've probably had about 69 people in the private chat that wanted to let you know that they are so proud of you in reference to sharing your personal experience and that they have went through it just as well. Some of them are actually saying that they are currently going through it and they are wondering if we could once have a conversation focused on men and prostate cancer. One gentleman says this is such a big issue, and I have dealt with so many different things when it has come to dealing with this prostate cancer. I want to thank you, Mr. Harrington, for sharing your personal story. I am too on estrogen right now, and I am going through radiation therapy for this terrible disease. This tends to be hitting a lot of African American men. As I enter our treatment center a lot, all I tend to see there are a number of African American men who are struggling with prostate cancer, such as myself. I think this is a big issue in the African American community. So thank you, Joe Harrington, for sharing your personal story. And Joe thanks you just as well. Go ahead, Joe.
Well, Nikki, yeah. I want to thank everybody for thanking me. Just a couple of things. When I was first diagnosed, and some friends reached out to me and they expressed their concern. One of the things that I said, and I said this all the way through my treatment, I might have cancer, but cancer doesn't have me. And so I went through it with a positive attitude. I knew I could get on the other side of it. I knew what the treatment was going to be like. I knew it wasn't going to be easy. I knew it was going to take time. I'm moving to the other side, and I plan to have a full life moving forward. So I encourage anybody out there to be open, share their experiences. That's the best thing you can do. It's almost like, because I was raised Catholic, and confession used to help. I didn't understand why, but but sometimes getting stuff off your chest helps. The other thing, and I want to offer, is if Congressman Davis is so inclined, Dr. Mason and I started a group focused on Black men's health years ago called the Tapello Institute. We're still around. We still talk to each other. And we would be happy to work with the congressman to actually set up September as Prostate Cancer Awareness Month. So that gives us, so we'd be happy to work with Congressman Davis to set up some kind of forum, public forum, to actually have a broad discussion of this topic in September, which is Prostate Cancer Awareness Month.
Outstanding.
Got
Congressman? He says you got it.
it.
All right.
You know, Nikki, the
All
other
right.
thing that
Sure, Dr.
I'm sorry.
Mason. No,
No,
go
I
ahead.
was going to say I thank Joe as well for sharing the information. And I must say that during the time when I was in practice, we actually started a support group for men who had prostate cancer. And we had meetings. And it was called Not By Myself. It was called, we had a number of things, including things that were brought on by Billy Davis. I mean, Billy Davis, who was one of the singers with Marilyn McCoo. And it does help. It really, really does help, because the other thing that happens that we haven't mentioned is what these treatments actually do to your sex desire and your sex ability. And that's a whole nother thing. And what I'll do is, you know, I'll promise to take that one on, to have that conversation, because As you start going through some of these treatments for prostate cancer, that can be a problem. Maybe it existed before you had it, and it became more apparent later. But also, many of you are also suffering from diseases like diabetes and hypertension. And even though you end up with a disease like a cancer, you cannot ignore the other things. You still need to make certain that you're getting the other things that are problematic appropriately managed, because sometimes the hormonal treatment can interfere. I shouldn't say interfere, but can interact with these other things. So we need to make sure that we talk about it broadly. And looking at this, I'll let people know if we're going to have something. And we used to have a thing that the men would meet by themselves, and then the women or their partners would meet by themselves, and then we would bring the group back together for them to have a conversation. So I think, to your point, Nikki, from the reception, from the people who are listening, that's important to talk about this, because it's, for men, and I'll say this, loss of being able to have an erection, which can happen with these treatments, is a major problem. And you've got to be able to know what that means and what the options are and what you can expect going forward. And I think when we had these meetings, we used to have a support group that met at one of the hospitals with some periodicity. So what we'll do is, man, we'll talk about that, Nikki.
Sure.
I'm starting to do a number of men. I'm starting to do a number of men's groups. I have one coming up pretty soon, out in the southern suburbs, in Rich Township, and it's called the Man Cave. And I've got one coming up at Apostolic Church pretty soon as well. So we do need time for men to have that protected space where we can be honest with each other and learn. But I will say, we should not be looking for quick fixes. We should not be looking for miracle things, because that's not there. What we need to understand is that these are the parts of life and the cards we get dealt each day with the things that we may have to face on a daily basis that we didn't have to face before. We can all get through these things if we work together and share with one another. And that's what I think that we need to do. And I'm looking at, even I was just with my grandson today, as how we might be able to do some of this virtually.
Well, Dr.
Outstanding.
Mason, I don't know about the Quran, but of course, the Bible speaks to it, says that the mind is willing, but the flesh is weak. So I'm going to read them both.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Well, Congressman, men, for a long time, men were just socialized to suck it up, not to show weakness, not to do this, not to do this. But one of the things I can tell you is, the time I spend as a urologist, you get to understand that men hurt. And I have to say this because I believe it's true. One of the biggest things that I had as a problem once I decided to retire and move on is that oftentimes that space in my office, in that exam room, was the most secret space that men had to be able to talk about things that really bothered them in a way that was unjudgmental. And I would just suggest that if there's people like that in your life that you can form that kind of relationship with, it'll be very, very, very important. But men are so uh, private sometimes, I think, to a fault, that we miss the opportunity to, and that's what Mr. Harrington was talking about with the pillow. We miss the opportunity to do the most important work, and that is to listen to one another. And it's okay to hurt, and it's okay to be confused, and it's okay that you don't like being at this point in your life, having to go through these changes. But the thing is that you still have life. And as long as you still have life, there's a chance for you to move forward and do exactly the things you want to do. Maybe exactly not like you did before, but still his life can move forward and continue. And I'm sorry for taking a long time to say those things.
Yeah, I just
No,
have to
it's
add one thing, and I'll be quick.
mhm.
We had an opportunity. We were forming this group to come up with a name, and someone told us, and I think it was Michael Ewing, who was a member at the time, and Trinity had looked at a number of African names for their health ministry, and one of the names they discarded was Tapelo, which is a South African term, which we understand literally means rebuilding the soul. And so we've been talking about changing people from the inside out as opposed to the outside in.
Sorry. Outstanding, outstanding. Well, Audrey Jaycock says confession is good for the soul. Sister Bonnie said that's awesome. And Robin, I see that you said no one answered my question. Please address it. And we are. But right before we address your question, we've been joined by Dr. Pierre Johnson, who is actually one of our women's healthcare specialists. And Dr. Johnson, we have talked about men with prostate cancer and issues that they've had in older Americans. But we've also had some women who share that they were glad we were having the menopause conversation this evening, and their head in the freezer is the only relief that they can get. So, Dr. P, can you just share a little bit on, because I know the hour is late, but thank you for joining us. Can you just go into a little bit on what your thoughts are on menopause and older American women, and actually how older American women should actually visit their doctors? Is it still necessary for pap smears? Is it still necessary for vaginal exams? Are these things that they should still need to do? Should they still screen for STIs? Dr. Johnson, can you share?
I can. Thanks for having me. I'm sorry for my tardiness, and I will try to truncate my response because that's a lot to chew off. But I'm gonna try to be with those answers. So as far as menopause, the thing is to understand the pathophysiology behind menopause, and what it is that in us all, we all have thermoregulatory centers in our bodies, which basically control our internal temperature. So, for instance, when there is, a very extreme heats, we have things in which cool us off. When there's when it's freezing outside, we shiver, we do things to heat our bodies up internally. Well, in women, these thermoregulatory centers are controlled by estrogen. And so as women get older and ovaries start to decline, the level of estrogen declines in the body. And when that level of estrogen declines, what can happen is those thermoregulatory centers, they lose control, which means that these now subtle changes in the environment, now the body can't really regulate as easily. So it doesn't happen for every woman. And the fear and what happens is, and what's crazy about it is that I see menopause all the time. And if you give me 100 women, which I have, about 5 or 10% of them don't have hot flashes at all. They go on the period space out. They don't even really experience hot flashes. They're perfectly fine. The overwhelming majority of women, I would say, 80 to 90 of that 100 women, they will have an occasional hot flash, but it doesn't really impact their quality of life. Like it's annoying, but it doesn't really stop them from doing the things that they normally do. Then you have about another 5 to 10% that have horrible hot flashes that cannot function. And those 5 to 10% of women, they pretty much control the narrative, because as humans, we really only hear the negative things. So out of the 90% of women that don't really have the problem, the 5 to 10% of the women that have to be on medications and have to really do things to counteract it, their voices are so loud because it's such a negative experience. So it puts a fear into all women. So let me just throw that out there. A majority of women do not have to have medications to counteract some of the symptoms of menopause. This is a minority of minority. I can count on 1 or 2 hands the number of patients that I have on hormone replacement therapy. Is just not abundant. But with that said, the problem that I see most, in which women have, excessive hot flashes or can't really tolerate things, is like you try to overcompensate. So for instance, you know a hot flash is coming, and they more so come when you're sleeping or when you're in the bed. And the reason that happens is because you're preparing for the worst. Women are kind of sleeping naked. In the wintertime, you got the air on, you have everything on, and so now your body is going through these large changes in the external environment, and they can't regulate it. So these hot flashes happen even more often at times at nighttime. But that's menopause, and that's what it is. And you have to really kind of understand it and regulate the external temperature yourself, as opposed to, and keeping the temperature kind of normal tensive, meaning that, normal, like normal temperature, to where it's like you're not overdoing it. You're not putting the thermostat on 50 trying to make it cool because you're preparing for a hot flash, but dressing moderately and keeping the temperature at a very room temperature type thing to reduce the hot flashes. As far as the other question of the things that women should do as far as taking care of their bodies. So here's the thing with pap smears, right? So from ages, no woman should get a pap smear before the age of 21. Pap smears always start at the age of 21, no matter how sexually promiscuous or whatever, or however a girl starts her having sex. It doesn't start before 21. From 21 to 30, your pap smear should be every 3 years. And they should be more frequent if there is some abnormality that dictates that. From ages 30 to 65, pap smears are actually every 5 years. They're not every year like women think like it used to be. It's not that way anymore. You should get something called co-testing, where we test for pap smears in addition to HPV testing. And if those things are negative, then a woman does not need a pap smear for every 5 years. As far as when you stop pap smears, you stop at the age of 65, and that's barring that there's been no history of dysplasia or abnormal cells of the cervix or cancer. But if you had completely normal pap smears, nobody should be sticking a speculum there for an exam after the age of 65. I had a woman actually today that was 66, but she hadn't been to the doctor for years. But she never had an abnormal pap smear. And I just told her today, I did a pap smear on her today. And if that's normal, she'll never have another one. As far as mammograms are concerned, mammograms stop at the age of 70. So if you had normal breast mammograms all the way up until that, they stop at the age of 70. And as far as labs are concerned, it as the older you get, the more labs you get. But from a yearly exam perspective, you should be getting, complete blood count, metabolic panels. Those are looking at, just what your blood, the things that are in your blood. It gets subtle detections of things happening wrong. So those should be had. You should get a hemoglobin A1C to see how your sugar count has been over the past 3 months. You should get a thyroid level. You should get a lipid panel that looks at your cholesterol. And for older women, that are menopausal, if you are high risk, you should be getting a DEXA scan, which looks at the bone density to make sure you're not in the osteoporotic or osteoporosis range. But those are, in a nutshell, as quick as I can do it, answering those questions. But if there are specific questions that I can answer, I'm more than happy to answer them.
Sure. Well, I will let you know if there's a specific question that comes. I want to thank you so much for sharing. Melinda Maxwell says, I commend you guys for speaking on the health. More men need to drop their guards and help their brothers with these and other issues, even the younger generation. Well, Maya, can you grab that, Dr. Maya, can you grab that plant-based question for us for Miss Hardaway?
Sure. So, I think as Dr. Mason may have, what I heard suggest is there are plants like chickpeas, lentils, things like that, black seeds, grains, and staying with fruits and vegetables and not spicy things. And then there's something called red clover, which is something that, but there are a few people, and Dr. Pierre, maybe you can speak to it too, that can kind of have a maintenance just off the plants. Dr. Pierre, I don't know if you manage menopause more than I do. I don't know if you have any other kind of natural remedies for it. I have a patient that, it's just trial and error. I have a patient that avocado, and she knows that avocado helps to balance everything out, you know. So, and then there's a controversy with the soy. So, Dr. Pierre, I don't know if you want to speak to that, but basically, fruits, vegetables, lentils, flaxseed, things like that. And go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, some other natural things: black cohosh, St. John's worts. There are a couple of herbs that have been shown to have a impact as it pertains to hot flashes. You don't necessarily like the first line of defense to, I'm always about healthy eating or what have you. And plant based is how I live my life. So I encourage everyone to do that. But from the standpoint of not, because hormone replacement therapy really scares everybody, as it should. But before you get to that, there are SSRIs or selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, specifically paroxetine, which is also approved for the treatment of hot flashes and menopausal symptoms as well too. So before you get to hormone replacement therapy, there are many different modalities that can be tried that are often very effective.
All right. So I know you guys hate for me to say this. I know you do. And Yolanda, I'm going to read your statement. Yolanda says, we need a part 2 to this one for the women and one for the men. This is awesome and very informative. And Yolanda was strong enough to say it because we have literally got 118 comments to do a part 2. So we're going to definitely look into that for you. We definitely will. We're going to be doing a live couch conversations. It's coming up really soon. Want to remind everyone about our senior expo that's coming up on Friday. That's this Friday from 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. at Build, which is located at 5100 West on Harrison Street. That's Build at 5100 West on Harrison Street. Our in celebration of Older Americans Month, we want to make sure that our seniors get there and grab the great resources that we're going to have for them. There is a plethora of things there for you. So, as always, we're going to go around the table and ask everyone to share their until next Monday. Starting with my colleague, Doug. Doug, what's your until next Monday?
So one of the things that really struck me about this conversation is that this is the normal part of getting older. When we evolved 2 million years ago, we were not designed to live this long. And so when things start to stop working, it's not really a problem with the design. That's what is actually designed to happen. And the purpose of this forum is to inform you of it so that you can recognize it and you can adapt and change, because your health changes as you get older and you need to do things differently to maintain a high level of health and function. So I think that would be the value of this, to understand if you start to experience some of these changes, see your healthcare provider, discuss it with them, have the test that they recommend, and have the discussion how to navigate the future.
Outstanding, Doug. So Doug talks about changes and how to navigate the future. Want to give a great shout out to Jackie from the National Kidney Association of Illinois. Jackie, we love you. The National Kidney Association of Illinois. Thank you so very much. Well, Joe Harrington, you're until next Monday.
Well, I had something else in mind, but I'm going to go back to Genesis 1:29. Then God said, "Look, I have given you every seed-bearing plant throughout the earth and all the fruit trees for your food." And that's what Dr. Mason refers to as God's pharmacy. So we are talking about eating a healthy diet moving forward.
All right. Thank you so much. So Doug told us about changes and how to navigate the future. And of course, Joe Harrington, that's Bishop on the side, gave us Genesis 1:1. All right. Deacon Dr. James Miller, you're until next Monday.
I think the one of the big things that I think we're seeing even in this conversation is that sometimes we can get almost afraid to share, and that in a way is is not a good thing. It's good to be able to share, even if something is hurting us. It's good to be able to share it. Two things happen. First of all, we find out that we're not the only person that's having these problems, and maybe someone else has experiences and have overcome what it is that we are frightened by, and sometimes that can be helpful. The other thing is that by sharing, sometimes it's like um, getting rid of something. You know, if there's something that's in you and you can't get it out of you, it tends to hurt more. But sometimes when you can let go, sometimes when you can give it to somebody else, it makes you feel better. It lightens the load a little bit. So I think that we have to share with each other. Do not be afraid of being judged. Not afraid of being right or wrong, but just share with other folks. If you're feeling bad, it's okay to say that. If something is hurting you, I think we have to learn that it's okay. And one of the things that I really recognize that in today's society, as opposed to 50 years ago, I think people were a bit more sharing of what was going on, or if the things were bad, they shared it more. So today we have so much pride, and pride is really harmful. That we don't want to share things. We're afraid that somebody thinks bad of us, or that it makes us look bad. So I think we have to really share the load a little bit. I think it'll make life a lot easier and help us to get rid of some of the things that are holding us down.
All right, so we're sharing the road. You're not alone. Genesis 1:1, and with changes, how to navigate the future. I want to say hey to Michelle Garrison that is here with us just as well. She wanted to make sure that we gave her shout out. Well, Dr. Mason, you're until next Monday.
Well, until next Monday, I pray that God gives us all the strength and health and resources we need to continue doing what we're doing. I'm grateful that He's chosen to use us in this way, and I thank you and the Congressman for providing the platform for this to happen. And I'm going to say it right now. I'm going to be really blunt about it, but I'd like to have, I do a radio show every Sunday. Been doing a radio show on VON every Sunday for the last 31 years, and I'd like to have the young gentleman who was the gynecologist on to talk more about these particular things, because I do get a lot of questions about it, and I don't have the right resources to deal with it. So I always like to put the right people out there to give the right information. So Nikki, if you would share that information with you and then with me, I'd appreciate it. But I really think this has been a great panel, and I want to thank Joe again for sharing, because that's one thing that we as men don't do enough of. And I'll say this in closing. Yes, men are very concerned about their prostate. And I tell them whenever I meet this, but your heart is going to kill you before your prostate does. And if we don't take care of that, we're more likely to have a stroke or a heart attack than to have prostate issues or not. I'm not saying it's not important, but we do need to talk about these things. And the things that help it all, because the first place you start is what you put in your mouth.
Outstanding. Well, Yolanda Williams says we are so grateful for this platform, and Greg is here with us and wants to give a shout out just as well. I will definitely make sure that I can connect you and Dr. Pierre, because every Sunday there is a doctor in the house on WVON. So I wanted to make sure that I shared that. We have gratefulness and thanking God for strength and resources. Where you got to share, you are not alone. Genesis 1:1, changes in navigating the future. Well, Dr. 100, you're until next Monday.
Until next Monday, I too, Mr. Harrington, would like to thank you for sharing. I can't underscore how much representation matters, and by you sharing, you encourage so many other people to share, and not feel isolated. It's easy to feel isolated. Typically the Black men that I have the honor of caring for experience, for a lot of reasons, isolation, historical context where they're told to just be strong and take care of everybody else, and and all those things that are not true, but were created to keep them kind of oppressed without any presence of physical oppression, in that space. So I'm so honored that you are even honoring your health, taking care of yourself, and being an example for our Black men. Thank you so much.
All right, for those of you who are asking me, where's
Thank you.
Dr. Tony tonight? Dr. Tony Hampton and Dr. Pete, because I get all your questions. So everybody's asking, where's Tony? Where's Pete? They have graduations going on, so we want to congratulate them for their students, their children, and their households that are graduating and moving forward. So Dr. Maya says representation is important. We talked about grateful mindfulness and knowing that God will give us the resources. You are not alone. You must remember to share Genesis 1:1 and changes how to navigate the future. Well, Dr. P, you're until next Monday.
So mine until next Monday, I even double down on what Dr. Maya was saying. Healthcare disparities are a direct reflection of our of the non-representation of, or the equality, equity of African Americans in healthcare. And to that end, the changes will not happen until we actually make them happen. Because if you look at the numbers were better in the 60s and 70s as far as representation were concerned than they are in the 2010s and the 2020s. And that's for three particular reasons. One, access to resources, and even more importantly, mentorship. Because our kids do not know that they have even the possibility of being doctors or something higher than themselves. To that end, my nonprofit is Pulse of Perseverance. I wrote a book with two of my best friends that did very well in 2017. Took us to very high platforms, the Today Show, ABC World News, and from that, we have given a monthly scholarship of $1,000 every month since 2018. And on Thursday, May the 16th at 6 p.m. at Little Black Pearl in Bronzeville, we are celebrating the launch of the P3 mentoring app, which is the first app of its kind, which is now directly doing what I'm saying. And now being an app where these kids have the direct access to mentors that look like them and access to the ability to get to these things and showing them the way to not only become doctors, but lawyers, engineers, principals, all in one application. So for any business owners out there, for anyone that actually cares about the changing the narrative and shifting the culture of our kids, please support. There are tickets that are available. There's a silent auction, there's a live auction, there's all types of stuff, music and things. That on Thursday, May the 16th at Little Black Pearl at 6 p.m. Is the launching of the P3 mentoring app, and it's our annual fundraiser starting on Thursday. So if you have time, if you care to change this narrative with us, please come out and celebrate with us. And if you cannot, you can visit pulsap3.org and donate and help us in our cause, in our fight to change the narrative of our kids.
So 2 quick questions for you, Dr. P. Well, one is a statement and one's a question. The question is, what's the address to Little Black Pearl? That's the question that was written. And the next thing is, one of our electeds who doesn't want me to say her name, she says, you can drive her anywhere because you have not missed a beat in this conversation while you have been driving down the street.
Yeah, I don't. I'll make it happen. There's no excuses. It's 1060 East 47th Street in Bronzeville. Yeah, I'm multitask. That's my I got to do it. I take out fibroids. I teach students. I'm talking. I'm doing everything. I'm shaking and moving always. But 1060 East 47th Street, 6 p.m. Please, we need support, because like we talk about a lot, but like when it comes time to put our energy, efforts, and resources, we shy away. So we are an organization that is deliberate and intentional about changing the narrative for our kids, because it's not that they are not intelligent enough or driven enough. The game has been played to keep them out of these spaces, and everyone knows that it's standardized testing. Everyone knows that when they look on TV and they see nothing but entertainers and they see nothing but athletes, and that's all that they think that they can be successful with. If they can have an app, we're meeting them where they're at. We're not telling them to go to the web or look on TV. They're on Instagram, they're on Facebook. So we're giving them an app in which they can see mentors that look like them, that they can ask questions and be linked to, but also kids that look just like them that are also pushing towards, spaces of excellence too. So that's what we're doing. Please come out and support. We would love it and appreciate it. Thank you, guys.
So that's Clutches and
Come
Kicks.
on, Dr. Pierre.
Yeah.
Clutches and Kicks. The
Come on,
signature
Dr.
event
Pierre.
is Thursday, May 16th. Thursday, May 16th. Well, Congressman Davis, take us home as always.
Well, let me thank all of us for an outstanding discussion. Our regular group. I also want to thank Dr. P because I listen intently to everything that we've said. But Nikki, I want to give you a shout out because I was listening to Push on Saturday a little bit, and they were playing part of a forum that had occurred. And when I turned my radio on as I was on my way to Cleve's funeral, I said, I recognized that voice. And of course, that was Nicole Harvey talking at that particular moment. And then Sunday afternoon, I had resolved that I wasn't going to really do much on Sunday, but I always try and at least get a little shot into Chinta Strasberg because I think she does such an outstanding service. I turned the radio on for a minute, and as I think I recognize that voice. And again, that was Nicole Harvey. And of course, I had gotten a little shot in on my way to church Sunday morning. And of course, Doctor in the House was in the house. And so I listened to 4 snippets of health this weekend. It was great. Of course, this morning I went with a group called the Hope Coalition to the Charles Evan Hughes School. And we had about an hour and a half with an outstanding group of young people. It's over in the 4200 West on 15th Street. And so I want to commend the kids. They were so attentive, so into everything that was being said. And of course, they were getting ready to graduate from 8th grade. And we were sharing a little bit of what they can expect when they get to high school. So I can tell you, we got a long way to go, but we are on our way. There is no doubt in my mind, none whatsoever. It takes a lot to get there. There's a long road home. But as long as we continue to feed ourselves and provide ourselves with the information and the understanding, Sam Cooke was right. It might be a long time coming, but I don't have any doubt that the change is going to come. And all that we've got to do is keep working at it. Keep working at it. Keep pushing it. Keep learning. Keep knowing. But then keep practicing it. Keep believing it. And keep knowing that we are part of the solution and not a part of the problem. So thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for another sterling Monday early evening. And we'll see you, hopefully, next week. So thank you all. It's been a great night. Next week is on the way. All right.
Good night.